The dog days of summer carried on with an extremely busy stretch of the wrestling calendar, though like August, the good hit some of the peaks of the entire year up to this point. Once again, it's best not to waste any more time, though as always, a reminder that I haven't seen every single match to have taken place, and the ones I do choose to talk about are all based on my personal enjoyment and nothing else. A slight spoiler warning, as I will be talking about match finishes here too. After watching 120 matches spanning 20 promotions and a few produce shows, here are a few of my favorites from the first half of September. I've been eager to get to this one since it was announced, let alone after all the continued praise for it in the months since. What I found maybe wasn't the transcendent match it has been hyped up to be, but taking it at face value, it just kicks so much ass. I can't imagine a scenario where this wouldn't, given the lineup alone. It's a who's who of killers from the Joshi independents, joined by the icon of stardom and a rare guest appearance. Naturally, it starts with SAREEE and Hash picking up where they left off, which feels oddly comforting knowing they're going to start unloading on each other in due course. VENY and Mayu get a chance to square off shortly after, before the match settles into a specific cadence surrounding its host. It's the SAREEE and VENY pairing that steal the show for me personally. VENY is a great bully in this match, vicious and petty when in control, and just outright nasty in the 50-50 exchanges. It's rare you find somebody who can match the disgusting forearms that the Sun Goddess provides, though VENY brings it in droves, which is perfect for a match that is all about the fireworks. I also appreciate that when SAREEE begins to spring free, Big Hash never fails to come flying into the frame to kill off her momentum. It's one of those things that just feels right. As big as I am on Mayu, she very much feels like the fourth person of four in this match. While that isn't a bad thing by any means, I just wish she was a little bit more involved. So much of the control is spent on SAREEE, and while it is done well, and it is her show after all, I think it could have been more effective if Mayu was on the receiving end of these sequences. She has a proficiency in bumping like a complete maniac, as seen in the brief exchanges with Hash, and I just would have liked to see more of it. It's a minor complaint in the grand scheme of things. Again, at face value, you're here for the violence, and this functions as a wonderful bomb fest. This is currently available for free on SAREEE's YouTube channel, so if you haven't seen it by now, there's no excuse. This particular version features a lot more cuts to the handheld cameras compared to what originally aired, and you get some cool alternate angles of a lot of the dives, as well as the aforementioned exchange where SAREEE and VENY tee off with reckless abandon. To little surprise, I love this. Maybe not as much as others, but still something I'm sure will feature when we get to year-end territory. This window revolved around CMLL's Anniversario, and we will get to that shortly. But the week prior featured a 6-man tag that shows how foolproof some of these concepts can be. In all honesty, it's not one that'll be significant in the big picture, it's just the type of match that you can throw on whenever and have a great time with it. Los Guerreros Laguneros tags are one of the safer bets in wrestling, and while watching so much for this project, it's nice to have these type of matches to fall back on. Years removed from their apuesta, Stuka Jr. takes little time to reignite his animosity towards Atlantis Jr., swiping at him during his entrance. They open with some nice exchanges on the mat before Los Guerreros take over. I appreciate that the Rudos take control, not by the most nefarious means, but simple obstructions to isolate their opponents. Atlantis Jr. gets the best of Stuka Jr. in this opening, and Ultimo Guerrero simply steps between the two as Stuka is thrown onto the entrance ramp. Small instances like this eventually find Atlantis Jr. outnumbered, getting the Rudos on the board. In fall number 2, you get the nastier side of Los Guerreros in their extended control segment, though it only takes one explosive swing from the Technicos to draw even. Again, not reinventing the wheel here. When you have guys like Mascara, Dorada igniting the comeback, you just need to buckle up and enjoy the ride. Which is what the deciding frame is dedicated to for the most part. Amongst all my praise for Los Guerreros, Stuka Jr. acts as a great base while Volador Jr. and Mascara Dorada fly around for the most of it. He was really good in this match in general. In the end, he falls to his old rival once again, as Atlantis Jr. secures the victory for his team. Sometimes all you need is a simple match featuring a bunch of wrestlers you like, and that's exactly what I got here. On the 7th, I was fortunate enough to once again attend All Out with my older brother, and overall I had a great time. There were only a few misses on the night in my opinion, and in-person bias lends itself to matches like Osprey Pac and the Lights Out Steel Cage match, compared to if I were only catching the pay-per-view broadcast. I am one of many who would agree that it was Willow Nightingale and Kris Statlander's street fight that stole the show, despite card placement going against them entirely. The result was, in my opinion, the best women's match produced by All Elite Wrestling in the 5 years of their existence. I'm extremely high on both of these two as wrestlers to begin with, though until this night they never really quite seemed to get it right in their previous encounters. But with the time, platform, and stipulation, they hit us with an emphatic market correction. There's a certain level of commitment that takes this match to another level for me. You think of all the madness between the stage dive, the light tube, and the thumbtacks, but it's the fury behind the more routine things that string this together so well. I found myself wincing at some of the initial chair shots and barricade throws just as much as the aforementioned high spots. It carries itself with the intensity befitting of a feud-ending match, while still maintaining the energy of a wild thrill ride. That energy goes a long way when you consider how the match is paced. It hits that sweet spot where they cram quite a bit into the 15 minutes, yet nothing feels too rushed either. Take for instance getting to the ring from the big stage dive. They clearly take ample time to sell and recover, but the transition to ringside and the thumbtacks feel seamless. I can't imagine that's a balance that's easy to find when putting together this sort of match. The finish stands out to me as well, as it's one that foreshadows some of the more disturbing imagery later into the show. The heel winning by choking out the babyface with a chain is pretty gnarly stuff, making for a stark end to this blood feud. By now we know that they inexplicably dropped Stat's heel turn after the match, but I retain the opinion that you could put this on in a vacuum and it'll still rule all the same. A wonderful display of violence, and the match this division has needed for a while. It's time to stop messing around and get these two in the world title scene where they belong. On to the Anniversario, with this year being the first that I watched live. Shortly after a 6-man tag that I seem to be the high voter on, we get to what is considered by many to be the peak of CMLL's year, the 4-way Apuesta. After months of matches collapsing into brawls and disqualifications, 4 men put their masks on the line, with the last man standing claiming the mask of whoever suffers the final decision. It's a genuine accomplishment to pull off a 36-minute 4-way elimination match without it feeling way too long or getting in its own way. A good chunk of the runtime is spent as a multi-man match as well, and they did a fantastic job to avoid a lot of the pitfalls that come with that sort of thing. In these summer months, I've talked a lot about energy and just the gut feeling a match can elicit, and this is one that certainly leans into that. A great deal of that energy is amplified by the notorious Arena Mexico crowd, mainly due to a unanimous emotional investment that really drives home the stakes of the situation. I'd imagine that all 4 wrestlers were able to feed off of that as they went for broke. I'm not going to pick on American TV crowds, but you just don't get this kind of earnest reaction to everything between the ropes, and this match is one of the better examples of how wonderful that can be. It feels like everyone in this match is shot out of a cannon from the off, and the only real noticeable drop-off is where Hechicero has to step out for a moment to get his arm wrapped up. He legitimately hurts it very early into the match, and I'm not entirely sure where. There's a nasty bump to the floor from the second rope, and an awkward collision with the barricade that might have done it. Please correct me if I'm wrong. Taking that into consideration, it did not dampen his performance by any means. He secures the second elimination on Valiente and sends this to a mano with Euforia for the remaining 22 minutes. For what this section may lack in focus, it shines in its unrelenting sense of escalation. Be it some stunning near falls, or the two employing riskier offense like Euforia's avalanche powerbomb, or Hechicero throwing himself into a crazy dive over the top rope. Combine that escalation with the urgency, the stakes, and the reverence towards those stakes, and 36 minutes goes by pretty quickly. It's Hechicero who ends up taking Euforia's mask, and I thought by doing so through submission was a powerful moment. Luchadors dedicate so much to the mask that by tapping out, there's no more definitive way to surrender it. While I didn't get too much into what happens in the match, it's one that feels like everything happens, and it's just best to catch the wave, ride it out, feel it all in earnest, and you'll capture what makes the sport so great in the first place. We wrap up this episode with a welcomed reintroduction to the fighting detectives, albeit in opposing corners. Nomura and Abe are flanked by youngsters who very much fit within their ideals. Abe and Nomura pick up where they left off, engaging in a furious ground game from the start. Much like their previous singles meeting, you can see Nomura visibly in pain from how hard he's throwing his targeted strikes. It's a nice little reminder of what these guys are best at before the kids get involved. This was my proper introduction to Kosuke Sato and Kozo Hashimoto, and you can consider me impressed. They take a lot from their mentors, made clear by how hard they're throwing forearms on the ground, how they maximize the most simple of exchanges, and allow things to breathe with a flair of personality. Sato and Nomura put the heat on Hashimoto, where Nomura is especially punishing. Rather than waiting in the corner for the hot tag, you can actually spot Abe coaching Hashimoto through the situation, which is a nice touch. Once Abe is able to get back into the match, they mix up the pairings a bit. There's a nice play stupid games, win stupid prizes moment in between, where Hashimoto gets the bright idea to throw a flurry of palm strikes at Nomura. As you could imagine, it goes horribly. Keeping the students and mentors amongst themselves does carry the run-in of this match, not just to see the astronauts and their well-established chemistry, but I liked how much leash they gave the kids, even giving them the decision with Sato submitting Hashimoto. They rose to the occasion, and I'll be sure to seek out more of their matches from this point on. And before I go, here are some honorable mentions. Katsuyori Shibata vs Minoru Suzuki from the Takayamania Empire show from September 3rd. I'm not going to sell you on this one being a great match, but for the sentiment alone. Ishin vs Yamato from Dragon Gate September 4th. I'm not as high on this Yamato run as others, but I think this is one of the stronger Dreamgate matches all year. The 2 weeks of AEW Collision from this window. Some real decent TV wrestling here between the 4-way qualifiers, Yuta vs Henry, and Deeb vs Sakazaki. Taiji Ishimori vs Doki from New Japan September 11th. Another solid defense for Doki, if not just let down by some of the limb work. Elio Del Fishman vs Tornado from IWRG September 12th. Speaking of being let down by limb work, this is a match of two halves. Fishman's targeting of the leg is so nasty, and I wish it ended up mattering in the end. The Queen of Villains promotional match that aired on September 12th. 80s Joshi is a blind spot for me personally, but you can tell there's a lot of heart behind the production. The match itself is a great time, featuring some of the best of the Joshi independents, and is also available for free on YouTube. And last but not least, Ryohei Oiwa vs Kaito Kiyomiya from Noah September 14th. A stylistic far cry from their meeting in the N1, which your mileage may vary depending on your tastes. And that is it from me. If you got this far into the video, thank you so much for your time and for hearing what I had to say. Be sure to do all the obligatory YouTube stuff by liking and subscribing, and find me on Twitter and Blue Sky at OuterStevon. I'll talk to you again next time as we wrap up the month of September. I hope these first few weeks of 2025 are treating you all well.